We are making sushi burritos today, 4 different types. We're going to be making a spicy salmon, a beautiful ahi poke, a spam musubi, and a grilled chicken with mango salsa. And this entire video was inspired by Sharp Knife Shop out of Canada. Sharp Knife Shop sent me this absolutely beautiful iron and high carbon steel Japanese knife that is handmade out of Japan with this absolutely gorgeous wooden handle. And we decided to pick up one of these beautiful handmade Japanese knives. They're going to give you free shipping on any orders over $150 anywhere in North America. Trust me when I say buying your first knife can be pretty daunting, but it is also a very special occasion. The guys over at Sharp Knife Shop will walk you through the process and really help dial in which knife you might need. Thanks to them, I'm going to be using this Tsujihiki throughout the video on places where it's appropriate because, yes, specialty knives call for specialty tasks. I'm absolutely ecstatic to use this beautiful knife today for this video, and thank you to Sharp Knife Shop for sending this out and sponsoring today's video. Check out their links down below at sharpknifeshop.com. Sushi burrito time. You guys aren't ready for this one. To start things off, we do need to start making our rice. I'm using short grain rice for this, and you want to make sure that you do enough sushi rice so that way you can make as many rolls as you really want. I'm using about 6 cups worth of rice, making sure that I bring it over to the sink and I wash it 3 to 4 times until the water is relatively clear. This is going to help you have a much better product. Now bring this over to your rice cooker and get that going. While the rice is going, we're going to be making a little bit of sushi vinegar. You can also just buy this ready-made and it's not too big of a deal, but if you're going to be making this at home, I'm using 250 milliliters worth of rice vinegar and 30 grams worth of granulated sugar plus just a pinch of salt. Bring this over to the stove and start heating this up just until all of that sugar and salt is dissolved. Once dissolved, just let it hang out. Next up, we're going to start cutting up our cucumber. Since I am using cucumber 2 ways for this, you want to use half of the cucumber you're using, in my case an English cucumber with the seeds still in it, and slice these into nice half moons. You want these to be relatively thin because we are going to actually cure this portion of the cucumber. Once you have all of your cucumber cut up, we're going to heavily start seasoning this with salt. Now I am using 2 different kinds of salts for this. First is a heavy pinch of kosher salt, followed by some yuzu salt that I found at my local Uwajimaya. However, this is really expensive and I don't recommend using it unless you're willing to pay for it. And instead, if you want that citrusy yuzu flavor, you can actually just buy yuzu extract instead, and it's a lot cheaper. Once you have your salts on your cucumber, throw a lid on top of it and start rolling this around in the container. Don't worry about putting this into a separate bowl and mixing it up, just place this into the container and mix it up, and we're going to let this hang out in the fridge until we need it for later. This is going to help extract a lot of the liquid from those cucumbers. Now for the second portion of the cucumber, this is actually going to be sliced into our julienne. For these julienne cucumbers, we're going to remove the seeds from this portion. This just makes it a little nicer for later, so that way the cucumber isn't as wet when we go to plate up. So after you remove your seeds, you can go ahead and just toss those out or drink them, I don't know, whatever you want to do with them. Slice your cucumbers into thinner slices. Once you have those thin slices, slice these into your slivers or your julienne so they look something like this. Now what I like to do is actually slice all of my cucumber ahead of time into those initial slices, so that way I have everything beautifully laid out, and this is going to help with the method of prep, so that way we can do this relatively quickly. Now line up all of your sliced cucumbers next to each other and start going down the line by slicing all of that cucumber into those thinner juliennes. You can take your time with this, but this is a nice way of just being a little bit faster with a lot of your meal prep. Now take those cucumber and place them into your container of choice, pop a lid on it, and throw this into the fridge for later. The next thing I want to do is slice up some lemon. Now this is somewhat optional, but I do love the flavor of the thinly sliced lemon. What I like to do is remove the ends of the lemon so that way I start slowly revealing the flesh on the inside. Once you see that flesh poke through, slice just a small portion off of one of the ends of your lemon so that way it doesn't rock around when you place this back onto your cutting board. Once it's nice and stable, slice the thinnest slice of lemon you possibly can. This is super difficult to do even for me, especially because lemon can be temperamental depending on how dense the actual lemon is. Once you start poking into seeds, just make sure you remove them because no one wants to bite into seeds into their sushi. Like, let's be honest, that's one of the worst things to happen. Once you have your lemons all beautifully sliced, place this into your container of choice, and you don't really need to do anything to this afterwards. The other half of lemon you can just use as garnish, I guess. Now for some tomato. I know this is a little weird, but we're going to be going with some tomato on this as well. For the tomato, I'm going to be treating this similar to how I treated the lemon. After giving yourself a stable base, we are going going to slice this as thinly as possible. The reason why you want these super thin slices is because it is going into a roll. If the slice of tomato is too thick, the tomato will actually fight back and try to open that roll up. This is why you want these super thin slices of tomato. Plus, you don't actually want too much of a tomato flavor in your sushi because that would just be a little weird. I know this is different, but that would be just a little too different. Once you have all your tomatoes sliced up, place this again in your container of choice. You see where I'm going with this? I like having all of my mise en place just ready to go. That bigger chunk of tomato, you can just eat it. Now for the iced red onions. The reason why I'm doing iced red onions is because it removes some of the harshness of the red onion. All you need to do for this is peel and slice your onion into thinner juliennes. I like to do really thin julienne for this because it's going to again help roll that sushi. You want them to look something like this, to where they're almost paper thin. Once you have your onions nice and sliced up, you're going to take all of your onions and place these into your container of choice, making sure you leave room for ice water later on. You need these to soak for at least an hour or two, and you can let these go overnight, but then they get a little soggy after that. Once you have them nice and iced up, just make sure they are fully submerged and pop these into the fridge. Now we're going to be making shallots two ways. I'm using one whole large shallot for this, and we want to slice these to relatively thin slices similar to how we did the onion, maybe just a little thicker. Take all of your sliced shallots, place them into your pan of choice or a small sauce pot, and add in about 300 milliliters worth of oil. I'm using equal parts blended canola oil and olive oil. We're going to slowly cook these over a medium heat, just lightly cooking the shallots to where they start to soften up. Once they've softened up, remove all of that beautiful shallot oil and place it into a heat-proof container to cool down. Once you have your shallot oil set to the side, grab yourself some granulated sugar and add a few heavy pinches to your shallots. Now bring this back over to the stove and begin to caramelize those shallots. This is going to be another component for the ahi sushi burrito. Once you have a little color on those shallots, remove them from the heat and let the color carry over. These will begin to get a beautiful golden brown color, but you don't need them to be completely candied. Place these into another heat-proof container and let them cool down completely before trying to use them. We're halfway there, so it's time for a dance break. Dance break is over, let's make some mango and habanero salsa. I'm using one whole mango for this, and unfortunately they aren't really in season, so this is a little more tart than I would like, but it still feels really nice. After peeling your mango, slice this into 1/4 inch thick slices, and once you have your slices all ready to go, we're going to dice this into a small dice. In hindsight, I think slicing them into almost a brunoise or a really small dice would have been a little bit better for this mango salsa, so I'm just giving you the heads up right now. Once you're done dicing up your mango, open up one large lime and juice this guy, making sure you place the lime the right way so no one gets mad. Now chop up a bunch of cilantro, add your entire bunch of cilantro to that container, and now to deal with the habanero. The habanero is no joke, so make sure you do glove up for this. Grab a separate knife and a separate cutting board. Slice it in half and remove all of the seeds unless you want it super spicy, but I don't recommend that. After removing all of the seeds, slice the habanero into these really thin, beautiful slices. Pro tip, if you slice it skin side down on the cutting board, it's going to be a lot easier. Chop this up as best as you can with your tiny paring knife, and once you have everything all chopped up into little bits, pop this into that same container with your mango, your lime juice, and your cilantro. Give this a good spooning and make sure you do season this with a good amount of salt. Hit this with a couple of cracks of black pepper and continue to mix this, bringing the bottom back up towards the top so nothing settles at the bottom. Throw a lid on it and you can also shake this a little bit. What this also does is it bruises some of the mango, so that way you release some of the juices within the salsa itself. Now pop this into the fridge and let it marinate. Now we get to finally cut our fish, and I get to use this beautiful sujihiki and just listen to my reaction. Oh my god. What? Oh my god. After having an outer body experience using this beautiful knife and seeing how absolutely wonderful it is to cut any kind of fish, I took my time with this, really enjoying the nuances of the knife. I cannot explain how beautiful this knife is and how absolutely thrilled I was to start using it. You know the knife is going to be beautiful when it actually separates the product from itself. You're not cutting it, you're literally separating the cells from each other. After you've diced up all of your fish, place them into 2 separate containers, and we're going to move on to some green onion. Now the green onion I did slice with the same knife, and look at how thin I was able to get these green onions. This is actually kind of key because this is going to go within the roll, so that way if they're too thick, you won't have them really popping out and you're going to be able to have these beautiful beds of green onions. Now the ends of the green onions we're actually going to save for a separate application. Take all of your sliced green onions and place this into a container with a paper towel. The paper towel is going to prevent it from getting mushy. Now for the other part of the green onion, remove the ends and split these from end to end. The reason why I'm splitting these from end to end is because I actually actually want to reveal the inside of the green onion. Once you've split all of your green onions, take these and place them onto aluminum foil onto a small baking sheet. And since these are going in the toaster oven, I don't really need too big of a baking sheet. Drizzle a little bit of fresh olive oil right on top of this, and then sprinkle this with a heavy pinch of salt. Pop this into your oven at 375 for about 8 minutes, and you're going to be left with some beautifully roasted green onions. These are delicious as is, just feel free to eat them. Or, cool them down for later. Now for our jalapeno. The jalapeno will be raw in this application, and I do want to make sure that I slice these super thin, similar to everything else we've been doing, because remember, this is going inside your roll. If they're too thick, you're going to have too big of a bite of jalapeno, and that's not going to be good for the end user experience, which sounds like something you need to sign off on. Once I've sliced all of my jalapenos, I stop slicing towards the big end of the jalapeno, so that way there isn't too much membrane on your slices. And now we get to move on to some of our proteins. I'm using chicken breast for this, but feel free to use chicken thighs if you really want to. Make sure you season the chicken breast with salt and black pepper. Place this onto a small sheet of aluminum foil, and then hit this with some lime juice. Wrap these as tightly as you can to trap in the steam when we start baking these. Once you have both of your chickens wrapped up, place this onto a small sheet tray, pop it in your toaster oven at 375 for 30 minutes. After those 30 minutes, let them cool down before slicing them, and slice these into half-inch thick pieces. You can slice these a little bit thinner, but then you may run into the issue actually tearing the chicken, so just keep that in mind. Once you have all your chicken sliced up, rewrap these and keep them warm in that toaster oven. Now we get to do the Big Daddy Spam. Yes, Spam is not optional for this. Crack it open and squeeze the side to help release it from its cage, and then slice these into 1/4 inch thick slices. I actually like these to be super thin, so that way when I go to crisp them up, you don't have a super thick piece of Spam, and you get really nice charring. Once you have all of your Spam sliced up, place this into your container of choice and bring this over to the stove. And no, Gandalf, this isn't a sushi cupcake, we made you one already. And in your saute pan over a medium, what is that? What is happening with this Spam? Make sure the pan is over a medium heat and start searing these things. Achieve GBAD on each side before flipping them, and remember not to overcook these because they're so thin. After searing them on both sides and achieving GBAD, place all of your crispy Spam onto the same pan as your chicken and keep it warm. Now for some sauces. Again, I'm doing the nifty 50 for this, so equal parts Kewpie mayo and your hot sauce of choice. In this case, I'm using sambal. Give this a good mixing and you're pretty much done. That's about it. And for the second sauce, I'm using a very accurate amount of 300 milliliters worth of light soy sauce, followed by a very accurate amount of 25 grams worth of granulated sugar. Bring this over to the stove and begin dissolving all of that sugar. You don't need to cook this any further than really dissolving it, just so that way the soy sauce doesn't cook too hard. Place this into a smaller container and then bust out your yuzu extract. You want to season this with your yuzu, just making sure that that beautiful citrusy flavor comes through. Mine needed a little bit more yuzu, so I went ahead and added it, but feel free to also just use lemon juice if you have it hanging out. Now for the curveball, we're using some chip. Can you stop? I'm trying to explain this. Now we're using some chips for this. I found these really cool ramen snacks that are supposed to be a little spicy, so we're going to go ahead and pound these out just until they're nice smaller pieces. In hindsight, put this in a food processor so it makes your life easier later. Trust me when you see the end product. The other chips I decided to eat. We're not going to use those. Now to finally make our sushi rice. This made a tremendous amount of rice because I do eat rice throughout the week, so we're using half of the rice we had actually cooked. After placing your rice into your hangiri, grab your sushi vinegar, using the paddle to evenly distribute that sushi vinegar, making sure that you do spill as much as possible onto your cutting board. I ended up using almost all of my rice vinegar, but I decided to hold back on a little bit of it. Now begin cutting your sushi rice, and when you cut your sushi rice, you're essentially dragging your paddle, making sure that the bottom is in contact with your paddle, so that way you're not really stirring the rice. I also use a small pan to help cool this down quickly, so the rice doesn't continue to cook. Make sure you do rotate this rice by bringing the bottom towards the top, and eventually you're going to see this beautiful glaze on top of your rice. Now grab a damp paper towel and place this on top of the rice to keep it nice and fresh and prevent it from really drying out, and try to find a spot for this. My kitchen is really small. Now we get to finally roll our sushi. I'm using half sheets for this, but please feel free to use these larger full sheets if you're making a full-size burrito. Since I'm eating 4 burritos, half sheets it is. We're going to take a small handful of our salmon first, top it off with some of our spicy mayo, hit this with a good amount of togarashi, which is a beautiful spice. Mix this up so that way all of that mayo coats the salmon. Now grab a handful of your sushi rice, making sure that your hands are wet when you do this. If your hands aren't damp or wet, you're just going to have a bad time trying to roll this out. Now place the rice on the top portion of your seaweed and start dragging this down. Think about moving it more so than mushing it. Once you have your rice in place, grab 3 slices of your lemon, 1.5 slices of your roasted green onion, placing that directly on top of the lemon, then then grab all of your salmon and place this right on top of everything. This was a little bit too much salmon, but I went with it. Now grab a handful of your crushed ramen chips and place that right on top of your salmon and begin to try to roll this. Remember how I said that this was just a little bit too much salmon? Yeah, it had a hard time sealing, so keep that in mind. Instead, I kind of forced the issue and made sure that I wrapped this as tightly as possible, and even though it started to poke out a little bit, which sounds really dirty, I was able to actually roll this entire salmon roll. Now for the tuna. Grab about the same amount of tuna you used before and hit this with a splash of your shallot oil, followed by some fried garlic chips that I found at my local Uwajimaya, or you can pick those up on Amazon. Give this a nice little toss, grab your rice, and do the same thing as before, except this time we're going to hit this with sesame seeds and then flip this thing over and start filling the inside right on top of the seaweed. Hit this with your candied shallots, followed by those cured cucumbers, some raw thinly sliced jalapenos, a little bit of chuka salad that I had laying around, which is optional if you don't have it. Then hit this with all of your tuna. I actually decided to hold back on some of the tuna and just eat it so I didn't run into the same issue again. Now garnish it with some green onion and begin to roll this thing up, same as before. You can see my sushi mat has changed to the half mat because it is better for these half rolls. Once you've rolled your sushi, remove it and look at how ugly that looks because you can't really see the inside. So here, I'm going to cut off a little bit and now it looks a little bit nicer. It looks beautiful. Now the third roll is going to be our chicken roll. For this, after rolling out your rice, garnish it with all of that beautiful crushed ramen which just falls off immediately. Then grab your sliced cucumber and place this onto your seaweed, followed by the thinly sliced tomato, your iced red onions, and at this point I just want cream cheese and salmon on it, but instead we're going to be adding our roasted chicken, followed by a hefty amount of our habanero and mango salsa. Yes, this is going to be a sushi burrito, kind of technically, but not really. Roll this thing up as best as you can. Everything is poking out at the ends, so just go ahead and trim it off if you really want to show off the inside, but that looks pretty solid. I was really happy with that one. And finally, our Spam sushi burrito. I'm using 4 slices of our Spam, which is quite a bit, so feel free to use less. I'm also adding some bean sprouts that I'm tossing with a little Thai chili oil. This was hanging out in my fridge, so I decided to use it because originally this was just going to be Spam. So I hit it with some cucumber, followed by my bean sprouts that were marinated in the Thai chili oil, and then wrap this bad boy up. There's nothing else going on with this. I just wanted it to mostly be a Spam roll, and that's the Spam roll. And there it is, guys, our sushi burritos, but different. They're pretty. They're pretty to look at. There it is, guys, all of our beautiful sushi burritos. Now, you can't really see them on this plate, but you can see them right here. I did a little bit of B-roll for you. What's great about sushi burritos is that it's a little more free than just making regular sushi. Feel free to fill it with whatever you want, to be honest. You can do anything with these. First one I'm gonna go for is the ahi, because I feel like this one is gonna be the least intrusive on my taste buds compared to the other ones, so cheers. Oh my God. The sweetness from the shallots, and then all of that beautiful shallot oil. The ahi itself is super fresh. The crispy garlic, oh, this is so good. Next up, we're gonna be going for the spicy salmon. I'm actually really excited for the spicy salmon because we have that spicy mayo, plus the ramen on there, that lemon. Oh, cheers. It's lemony, it's spicy. It's just the charred onion in there, the ramen. How am I supposed to eat all of this? Now we're gonna go for the mango salsa with the chicken. This is why I love making these. I don't know what else you would want from this. I mean, the mango salsa is absolutely delicious. Has a bunch of citrus behind it. It's spicy. Then you have the ramen on the outside, giving it this weird flavor that just works so freaking well for some reason. Last but not least, the Spam. Now the Spam is going to get a little bit of that sweet soy sauce we made with the yuzu, because I think it's gonna cut it really, really well. Oh, can I just get a little dip? Oh my God, I need the plate back. Cheers. It's so wrong, but it's so right. That Thai chili with the bean sprouts, and then the fattiness of the Spam, and then the salty and the citrusy of that yuzu soy sauce, a little bit of sweetness that cuts through, so good. Oh. This entire video was inspired because I got a beautiful knife, and I want you guys to be inspired by my ridiculous decisions to make these. My name is Chef PK, and remember, keep playing with your food. All right, we're gonna go in. We're going in. Yeah.